Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. We hear that Tesla have around 80% market share of the BEV market in the US, but Tesla's market share is much lower in other parts of the world. Why is this? Well, for starters, it's all completely arbitrary where Tesla decide to sell their cars. As we know, they are supply constrained, which is why I always find it so comical when people like to point out how Tesla's market share has plummeted in Norway or somewhere, only to see in a few months' time they're back as the number one selling EV. Well, the shipments arrive when they arrive. As long as all cars are being sold, then that's the main thing. But anyway, we hear Tesla only has around 20% market share in some other nations, which is dramatically different from 80% in the US. Mind you, the US is Tesla's home turf, and currently contains Tesla's largest operational factory there too, in Fremont. So it makes sense. Of course, Tesla have been establishing themselves in the US for nearly 2 decades, and have been building out their own infrastructure over that time, what we now refer to as the Supercharger Network. America is huge. Trust me, I know. I've driven from California to Florida, and back again. Well, up through Canada for a bit too. But yes, it's a big, sparse country, which means they need a good supercharger network, and cars with long range. If not, then you're neglecting a large part of your market. Sure, you could say, well, some people don't need that range, and you'd be right. But so what? There isn't much else to choose from, so you may as well just get a Tesla anyway, with all the accompanying infrastructure. Any of the non-US competition are somewhat disadvantaged by shipping and import duties already as it is, but the fact that their cars simply don't offer enough range for an American driver is just going to be a no deal for a lot of them. It might be okay in parts of Europe perhaps, especially when they can depend more on something like rail for a longer trip too, something that the US lacks. This is a serious barrier to entry for all EVs in the US, which is going to be their most profitable market. The same applies for Ford and GM too. They have to make a decent range for US consumers with a charging infrastructure to back it up. All they really have is Electrify America in regards to charging networks available. It has taken Tesla a long time to build up the charging network they have, and they had first mover advantage. They were able to pick out all the best charging spots first. Electrify America is a total disaster anyway. You often hear about the chargers out of service or there aren't any charging points available, and that is if there are even any convenient locations nearby. Anyway, what do you expect? It's hardly a real company. It's more just a punishment. Really, this is part of Volkswagen's reconciliation from their emissions scandal. It's not a real company with any serious plans or vision, yet it's all the other EVs have to depend on as a charging network in the US. Sure, people often say one of Tesla's main competitive advantages is their charging network. Well, this is why. It would be like buying an ICE Ford and not being able to use the vast majority of the gas stations available. Also, when considering the 2 most popular EV models GM and Ford are going for next year will be the Hummer and the F-150 Lightning, they couldn't have possibly picked worse cars for range and charging. I mean, are they just trying to sabotage the industry or something? Showing consumers such inferior products that it puts them off EVs altogether? Sometimes I feel that is the only rational possibility, the way these companies act. Tesla dominates the US charging infrastructure, and I'm not sure what Ford or GM expect to do about it either. Like I said, America is a big country, and Americans do long road trips in cars. Okay, here's something ironic. Despite the legacy autos getting assistance from the government to give them a chance to transition to EVs, and they still can't produce enough range for a practical EV for America. They may offer enough range for some other nations, perhaps in parts of Europe, but not the US. And unfortunately for them, it's the US where this tax credit will be. Tesla literally owns the US as far as charging stations are concerned. Ooh, but don't forget the F-150 does have that enormous frunk. Surely that's got to be tempting. Of course, Biden has a plan to fix that with 500,000 fast chargers. But I think we can all do the back of the envelope math on that one. Why would you want to buy a different EV in the US when you have this outstanding infrastructure already and growing by the day? Of course, not to mention all the other reasons of buying a Model Y over a Mach-E, for example. But are people that brand loyal to Ford that it has to be one no matter what. Just like how consumers were brand loyal to their Blackberries until they finally capitulated to an iPhone. I think all consumers will eventually have to capitulate and realise how moronic they're being not owning a Tesla. I mean that. Well, in the future, of course. When we have feature-complete FSD. Can you imagine, on the highway, seeing a Ford Mach-E owner driving in soul-crushing traffic, whilst you have your feet up, relaxing, catching up on some Netflix? Eventually, people will come to their senses and think, do I really love Ford this much that I'm actually willing to drive it? Aside from the pathetic Bolt, the US legacy autos have really fallen behind on EVs. At least Volkswagen made early attempts with a Porsche Taycan. I think US autos were asleep at the wheel. They've been incredibly complacent and will suffer as a result. But if you think they're bad, I think the Japanese have been even worse. Toyota took a long time until they got EVs. Somehow they missed the entire boat. They decided to invest in hydrogen instead of electric for zero emissions. On top of that, they figured hybrid was the future. You get so much range already, and they cost so little to run. Toyota had done a great job at getting cost of ownership for ICE autos down, except now we know that hybrid was not the right path. Electric cars can get to a much lower cost of ownership. Only now we're seeing them make a desperate attempt into an EV with some RAV4 type looking Frankenstein model, but they've left it too late to jump ship most likely. Where are they going to get the batteries? Apparently BYD is going to help them with their first model. But in my opinion, as Toyota is the largest legacy automaker, they're likely going to suffer the most from diseconomies of scale too. They have so much invested in their plan of selling hybrids for the next decade or so, it's going to be very hard to transition. Toyota even have their own city with nearly 500,000 population oriented around making Toyota cars. If I was Toyota, I wouldn't have gone with the BZX4 monstrosity, but would have tried to focus on more of a luxury electric Lexus to start with. As for Tesla's 80% market share, well, given that their new factory in Texas is nearing completion, when that's up and running, well, Tesla's total US capacity will more than likely triple. In the meantime, perhaps the offering from the legacy companies may actually double. Well then, that would mean it likely that Tesla are not only able to hold their 80% share, but actually possibly increase it still, as absurd as it sounds. There just isn't much else in the pipeline for the legacy autos. Well, actually that's not entirely true. GM have just announced another electric car on the way, actually. Yes, really. GM are going to make an electric muscle car. Aside from the fact that an American muscle car by default really should contain a V8, but if Porsche can get away with electric turbos, then GM can have an electric muscle cars too. Now, you might first think an electric Camaro perhaps, or maybe even an electric Pontiac GTO. No, a Corvette! Well, I'm not sure if GM are going to assign a previous brand to it. It may just be on its own. Perhaps seeing how Ford calling their electric car a Mustang appeared to help in no possible way, GM are going to try a different angle. The car will be launched under the Dodge brand, but I don't think it would be called an electric Charger. It might be a little bit too on the nose. But actually, this car is unique. GM have found a niche here that no one appears to be serving: the affordable electric sports car. So if you want a two-door sports car and can't afford a Tesla Roadster, soon there may be a solution for you. Well, I say soon, but apparently not until 2024, if everything goes well. Yeah, it can take a long time to design a new electric car, but perhaps by that stage they might be getting a reasonable range on their batteries at least. 2024 is also a year for Chrysler to bring to market an all-electric Dodge Ram. Seriously, do none of these companies realize what Tesla will be in 2024? We all know how exponentials work, and how large a number you arrive at when you keep compounding. Well, Tesla's 50% annual growth will also add up quickly. Oh, but really, the Dodge Ram? I guess because it's one of their best sellers, but then has to compete against the F-150 Lightning and Cybertruck. Yeah, good luck with that. I'm somewhat shocked at how few EVs we're hearing about from the legacy companies, particularly from GM and Ford. They say they're aiming for 13 models by 2025, but we don't see any evidence. It takes a really long time to get a decent EV up and running. Although the Chinese do seem to act fairly rapid, that makes you wonder how rushed they may end up being. Anyway, I don't expect to see any other large EV presence in the US anytime shortly. it would appear that Tesla really has locked down the US market. It's theirs, funding secured and all. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.